Hi, so today I'm going to go through Benjamin's birth story with you. He's on my lap. Hopefully he's going to be well behaved. He looks pretty well behaved at the moment, but we shall see. So it's basically 4 days after I had him. I had him on Tuesday the 18th of October 2016, and I don't know if you will have seen previous videos, but I was actually planning to have a home birth. So that obviously, if you read my blog, didn't go to plan. What actually happened is on the Monday, the day before my due date, I'd had reduced movements and I'd had to go in to be monitored the night before, and they told me to come back in on a Monday and have an emergency scan done. They just wanted to check everything was okay with him. When they did that scan, they were a bit concerned as he didn't seem to be growing. He actually seemed to have, his growth seemed to have dipped down from where I'd had my growth scans with him. My last one was at 36 weeks and his growth didn't seem to have been kind of going up since then. Especially his tummy measurements were quite low. So they were a bit concerned, and the doctor advised to have an induction so that I didn't go overdue, because they thought that it could be something to do with my placenta, and obviously as you go overdue the placenta can stop working as well, so they didn't want the placenta to stop working as well as it was if the way it was working wasn't obviously necessarily working very well. So that didn't give them much chance obviously to induce me because my due date was the next day. So they said, okay, we're gonna send you away and then you call in tomorrow to get a time for induction for tomorrow. So it was a bit of a shock because I'd gone from obviously thinking, oh, he could still be like another week or two overdue, to suddenly having the birth planned for the next day. So I went away and got a little bit panicked, to be honest. Obviously I was a little bit concerned about his growth and whether there was something wrong potentially, but I tried to just focus on the fact that I was going to get to see him the next day. And I went away and got some snacks and things for labour, and also something to wear for leaving the hospital, because where I'd planned a home birth I hadn't really planned anything to wear leaving anywhere, because I'd just be in like PJs straight away afterwards. So I went for a little shopping trip with my sister. The kids stayed with my mum that night, and then Ed had an exercise class he had to do in Southampton, so he went there still, and so we got to bed quite late, about 11:30 that night, so we didn't have a lot of time to wait until we would see our baby. That night I didn't sleep very well at all. As you can imagine, I was quite excited and also nervous, and I was up generally anyway throughout the last bit of my pregnancy, throughout the night to go to the toilet. So by that morning I was quite tired, but also really obviously excited. So I phoned up at 7 o'clock, which is what I was advised to do, and I thought maybe they would give me an induction time of like midday or something, but they said to come in at 9 o'clock. So we didn't have long. I washed my hair, got a few things ready. I'd already packed everything obviously up the night before ready, so we got that all in the car and then off we went to the hospital. When we got there, we got shown to the ward, shown around the ward, and then to our little kind of area with the bed and a curtain around it. So we made ourselves kind of comfortable as much as we could in there. At about 10 o'clock I was put on the monitor, and they monitored the baby's heartbeat and made sure that everything was okay, and they also examined me as well and said that I was only ½ centimetre dilated. So obviously not really going anywhere at that moment. And they advised me that soon they'd come along and give me the pessary that would start the induction. So at 11 o'clock they came and did that, and they said it could take up to 24 hours for anything to happen. They'd leave it in for 24 hours, and at that point we'd have to obviously kind of consider what the next stage would be if it hadn't have worked within 24 hours. But she did say, the midwife I was speaking to, that it probably would work because it was obviously my third baby and my body was used to labour and kind of knew how to progress. So we were quite hopeful. My mum came along. My friend had looked after my daughter Carly for us. That was really nice, so it meant my mum could come along as well. So she came along and the three of us just sat and watched Friends for the rest of the kind of the day. I had my hospital lunch, which was not very nice, at around 1 o'clock I think, and we went for a couple of walks down to the petrol station just down the road because we couldn't really go much further, and I did have some contractions at this point, but I'd been having lots of forced labour starts and they weren't really any stronger than that. They were kind of close together by a couple of minutes. So yeah, I was watching Friends and I was contracting every couple of minutes for about 30 to 45 seconds at a time, but I didn't really want to believe that I was in labour, just in case I jinxed it and it just kind of stopped again, especially after so many stop-starts before I'd gone in to be induced. I kind of thought, well, this could just kind of be just not much at all. Obviously, where I'd been induced, I should have really thought, yeah, okay, it's starting, but I thought, well, I'm in the right place anyway, so I might as well try and relax and forget about it for the time being. So carried on watching Friends. At about 3:30 in the afternoon, my sister turned up just to come and say hello. So she came in, and at that point the contractions had got quite bad, so when I was having them I wasn't able to focus on the TV. I would kind of close my eyes, hold on to Ed's hand and be squeezing it really tightly, and so the pain was getting a lot worse. After about half an hour my sister went into the waiting room and my mum came back, and at that point she saw how much pain I was in and she said, look, you need to have some pain relief now because you haven't had any and you look like you're really struggling. So we called the midwife, who came and said she was going to put me back on the monitor and also to examine me to see if I'd dilated at all. So she did that and I was 2 centimetres, which isn't a lot, but you know, obviously it increased from the ½ centimetre, so something was happening. And as in the past with the 2 other children, I'd gone from 5 to 10 centimetres quite quickly. They were keeping an eye on me to make sure that obviously, like, if things progressed quite quickly, that I could get to the delivery suite. So she kept me hooked up on the monitor and I continued to have contractions, which obviously they could see were building in intensity. It was still quite painful and I was still on the ward, so there's other people obviously in the beds next to me and opposite me who could hear me when I was having these contractions, and I was really aware of the fact that I was making quite a lot of noise at times. I wasn't like screaming or anything, but I was making quite loud noises when I was in pain. So that carried on for the next couple of hours. At 6 o'clock, it had kind of reached complete, like, really intense. The midwife examined me again and she said that I was 4 centimetres at this point, and because of obviously my fast labours before, she said it was probably a good idea at this stage to get me onto the delivery suite. So she went to try and get me a bed because it was quite busy over there. So she said it wouldn't take very long. At this stage I'd had codeine and paracetamol, but I hadn't had anything else. They had discussed possibly giving me pethidine, but they were still monitoring me to make sure that the baby wasn't in distress or anything, with the contractions coming quite close together, and they didn't want to give me pethidine in case the baby came quickly, because obviously it can make you sleepy and it can make the baby sleepy as well if he were to have it too soon before he came out, which is, to be fair, what happened with Carly when I was in labour with her, and she did come out quite sleepy, so I didn't get given pethidine at that point. So yeah, at 6 o'clock they went to try and get me a bed. By 5:30 they managed to get me one, so they signed me over onto the delivery suite midwife care. So she came along with a wheelchair and got me off the monitor and got me into the wheelchair. I had a contraction while I was getting into the wheelchair, which was so painful, and then I had a couple more as I was being wheeled along the corridors in this wheelchair. So we got into the delivery suite, got into the room and got straight onto the bed to be monitored again, which wasn't kind of what I wanted. I wanted to be as active as possible because I know that lying down can actually slow things down and can be a lot more painful than kind of moving around and being able to kind of move around and get into different positions in labour, but they wanted to keep me on the monitor. What she did say, this midwife who had taken over my care, was that the baby's heart rate seemed to be decelerating with each contraction, and she wanted to keep an eye on that, and she wanted somebody else to have a second opinion on what was going on as well. So they were a bit concerned about the baby, and they thought the best thing would be for me to stay being monitored throughout. So although I'm not obviously like happy really that I didn't get to be active, I can understand why they did it, and obviously the most important thing was for the baby to be safe. So yeah, so that was at 6:30. By 7 o'clock I was in so much pain. I was begging them to either give me pethidine or let me push because I was in so much pain and I wasn't coping well. I'd started on the gas and air at 6:30 when I got into the delivery suite, but although I'd loved gas and air in my previous labours and I thought it really worked and it was really helpful, this time it just wasn't really doing anything. I didn't feel like I wanted to really hold it. It was getting in my way. I was obviously holding Ed's hand, squeezing his hand when I was having a contraction, and the gas and air was just getting kind of in the way when I was trying to hold that as well. And yeah, it just didn't seem to be doing very much, to be honest, so I wasn't coping very well at that point. The baby's heart rate apparently was still decelerating with each contraction, so they were a bit concerned. I said that I wanted my waters to be broken, so the midwife said, okay, we can do that because we will check that the baby's not in distress and hasn't done a poo, because obviously the waters would have been a different colour if he had have done. So they broke my waters at 7 o'clock. They were clear, they were fine, so that was good. But the pain went even worse at that point. Got really painful, to the point where I was kind of like almost hallucinating with it. I was still asking for pethidine or to push. I felt like I needed a push. The kind of pressure was so strong. By 7:30, they decided they needed to put a clip on the baby's head, and so they'd been getting ready to do that, and I'd begged them to let me stand up, which I'd done once, and the change between lying down and standing up was so immense. Like, it felt so good to be stood up and the gravity to be helping, but unfortunately I had to lie back down again to have the clip put on. At that point I said I was definitely ready to push, I needed a push, and the midwife had already examined me when she broke my waters obviously, and I was still only 4 centimetres at that point, so she didn't think I needed a push. But when she was putting the clip on, she said obviously I'll check at that point. So when she went to put the clip on, she saw that I was actually fully dilated. So then she said, okay, with the next contraction you can push. So I did, and so I pushed and panted, and it was really good because I did actually like manage to pant rather than to like try and push when she said pant, and so that really does help apparently to get the baby out and to not tear. So it was like 3 pushes basically, and he came out all in one pretty much. There wasn't like a, okay, delivering the head, okay, now you need to deliver the shoulders. It was like, okay, so he's out, and he was delivered straight onto my chest, which was one of the things I did actually want, so that was good. So he came straight up, and he was really small. Like, he looked tiny in comparison to how I thought he would look, to be honest. Straight away it was kind of quite panicky. The midwives were like, okay, we need to kind of get the cord cut, we need to deliver the placenta. So I had the injection to speed that part up. Obviously I had the baby at this point, so I wasn't too bothered. I was just holding him and looking at him. Ed cut the cord, and then they sorted that all out, and then they took some blood and stuff and like tested the placenta and the cord. I think because of his heart rate decelerating, they wanted to try and do some tests to find out why that was. So they were doing that. He didn't get weighed for like ages. The midwife went away and came back, and at some point later he was weighed, at which point he'd already had a couple of feeds. Yeah, my sister came in from the waiting room, so she came in and saw him. So there was Ed and my mum and my sister in the room, and we let close family know, and then we announced it on social media as well because everyone wanted to know. And I realised at that point how quickly everything had gone, because obviously when you're in pain it feels like it's taking quite a while, but actually it was like a really quick labour. And I mean, I only came over from the ward at 6:30, and I'd had him by 8:25, and the placenta and everything was out as well within the next 5-10 minutes, so everything had been really quick. It was at this point that they basically said to me that I was going to have to stay in for 48 hours. which I wasn't happy about. They said it was because I had been on antidepressants during my pregnancy, and that I, all the way through, like, I would have had to have been monitored for 48 hours afterwards. But I'd been obviously given the go-ahead for a home birth at 36 weeks when I was taken off consultant care, and it was never mentioned to me. So I kind of argued this, and I was like, well, why would I not have been told before? They said that I would have been and I should have been, and it was in my notes, but since then I've spoken to my home birth midwife, and she said that that's not true, and that she wouldn't have insisted on me going to the hospital. There was nothing ever in my notes. So anyway, to cut a long story short, after a little bit of arguing with the midwife, who took over my care after my midwife who delivered the baby went, she eventually said, okay, well, we'll just let you know the risks and you can self-discharge. So that's what I did. It still took a while, and the baby's temperature was a little bit low to begin with when he was born and for the hour afterwards, so we had to wait around for his temperature to kind of pick up a bit, but then that was fine. And at 12:30, 5 hours after I'd given birth to him, we did actually eventually leave. So that was nice. I really wanted to be in my own bed that night. Even if I couldn't have a home birth, I wanted to still be in my own surroundings as quickly as possible. Because with Carly, my second, I'd been home like 4 hours after I'd had her, and it was really nice just to be kind of at home, rather than in hospital. I really don't like hospitals, and I don't like the hospital environment at all. So yeah, so that was the story of him being born. And like I say, it wasn't anything like a planned home birth, planned water birth at home, hired the birth pool and everything, which I've now got to send back unused. But obviously ultimately what was the most important thing was having a safe delivery of the baby, which we did. And they obviously were concerned about him during labour, and he was quite small, so something obviously hadn't been working really towards the end. Maybe the placenta itself hadn't been working very well, so it was best for him to just come out in the safest way possible, and that's what happened. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to the birth story of baby Benjamin. He has slept, and yeah, so he was 6'4" at birth, and he is now on day 4, and as of yesterday he'd lost 4% of his birth weight, which is really good because they can lose up to 10%. I'm breastfeeding him and it's going really well, apart from it's a little bit painful, but obviously that's working for us at the moment, and he's picking up his weight now as well. So thank you for watching as always, and do subscribe to the channel.